Next up is Gary Hansen, and he's the president of Blue Stakes of Utah, and he is going to tell us what the dig law here in Utah requires and how Blue Stakes makes it all work. And there you go.
Thanks, Carl. Well, hopefully the things won't be cut off on the slides up here so you can understand what I'll be talking about today, but Blue Stakes is certainly appreciative of the invitation from Carl and the City of Salt Lake to come and participate in this meeting. And I'm grateful today to be sitting at the table up here with someone that I've come to know over the years, Bob Kipp. And we've certainly tried to incorporate many of the things that the Common Ground Alliance has brought to pass with their initiatives. And he referred to the best practices. And there's a best practice section in there for one call centers. And I will tell you in the state of Utah that we try to follow that. Now today, you can see up here on the screen, the title of my presentation is The Dig Law in Utah, How It Works. Let me give you a disclaimer before I get into that. Blue Stakes is not a regulatory agency, it's not an enforcement agency, and I'm not an attorney. And so as we talk today, I'll refer some things regarding the statute to you today, and certainly encourage you to receive some legal advice if you want clarification. Up here on the screen, you can see a portion of Blue Stakes' mission statement. We have two primary purposes, and that's to process locate requests that we receive at the notification center and to provide damage prevention education throughout the state of Utah. We've just concluded over the last 2 months providing training to over 1,700 contractors and utility operators in the state of Utah. As far as processing locate requests, people confuse Blue Stakes as the individuals that go out and locate and mark underground facility lines. Blue Stakes is a notification center, as a call center. We receive the proposed dig site information from the one who's digging, whether that's a homeowner or whether that's a contractor, and then we pass that information on to the utility operators that are members of the Blue Stakes Association, and they're the ones that go out and do the locating and marking of the underground utility lines. Today, passed out to you was an excavator's guide, and I'd ask you to pull that in front of you. I'm going to refer to a few items in that today as I give the presentation, but contained in that excavator's guide through about page 24, so the first 24 pages, you'll find information about the association, as well as information that individuals need to have available when they call in a locate request. Starting on page 24, we've put into the booklet the best practice, Appendix B from the Common Ground Alliance, which is the color code marking and the marking guidelines that are to be followed. And you're going to hear why that's important here in a little bit. Starting on page 45 in the booklet, and that's what I'll refer to today with you for a few minutes, is the reproduction of the state law, the Damage to Underground Utility Facilities Act, and that's what I'll be talking on mostly today. As I start the presentation, there's two terms that I want you to be aware of, that of an excavator and that of an operator. When I refer to the excavator today, I'm talking about the people that are moving the dirt. When I'm talking about the operator, I'm referring to those who own, operate, and maintain these underground utility lines. You've heard much today about pipelines that carry natural gas or hazardous liquids today. When I talk about utility operators in the state of Utah, we're talking about any type of underground facility owner. As you can see up here, there's a section in that statute, Section 9, that refers to the association, and that's how Blue Stakes was formed. Two or more operators came together a number of years ago to form the nonprofit association called Blue Stakes of Utah. So when you think of 811, anybody dialing 811, that comes right into the association, right into Blue Stakes of Utah. But there's two provisions in the statute. The first one says if an association is formed, each operator with an underground facility in the area shall become a member of the association. So in Utah, there are no exemptions for utility operators not to become a member of the association. And if you go off of that provision, the individuals that are digging would need to contact each and every operator individually. But thank goodness they put another provision in the law that's listed below that, and you can't read that in its entirety, but it says if an operator does not comply, the operator is liable for damages incurred by an excavator who complies with this chapter's requirements. So it behooves an underground utility operator to become a member, to receive the notices that are received of proposed excavation, and that they can go out and locate and mark their lines and protect those lines. Just a brief history of Blue Stakes. Blue Stakes was formed back in 1974, so you can see we've been around for a number of years now, and our purpose back then is the same purpose that exists today for the association, and that's to promote public safety while working around these underground utility lines. When Blue Stakes was first formed, there were only 3 member utilities participating with us. Back then you knew them as Utah Power, Mountain Fuel, and Mountain Bell. Now those 3 companies are still with us today under different names, but you can see over the last decade that we've increased in membership in the association from 266 members in 2001 to today we have over 535 member utilities throughout the state of Utah that are members of the association. As an association, we're governed by a board of directors that are made up of these individuals representing from these companies that represent the different utility classifications that we have as members here at Blue Stakes. And I would tell you, as you've heard today about the Utah Pipeline Association, all those members of the Utah Pipeline Association are participating members of Blue Stakes of Utah. Now in your booklet under that law section, there's a section number 4 in the back of the book there that talks about the notice of excavation. So I'm going to go over with you just some of the basic legal requirements that exist here in the state of Utah. Okay, I think I've already talked about the notice of excavation. But on the next one here is dealing with the requirements when they don't apply. And there's 3 exemptions in the statute where an individual wouldn't need to call to have a locate request. And that's in case there's an emergency while gardening or tilling on private ground. So we get the question all the time, when do we need to call for a locate request? And we tell you to call all the time, even in these exemptions, to ensure that when you're digging, even if you're tilling on private ground or gardening, that you won't go down and hit these underground utility lines. You're going to, if you do these items in the exemptions here and cause a damage, you won't be subject to civil penalty, but if you cause personal injury or death, it's not going to do you any good. So we always encourage you to make sure that you call before you dig, make sure that utility lines are located and marked. The period of time frame in Utah that you need to call before your excavation is referred to in the statute as 48 hours or 2 business days. It doesn't count Saturdays, Sundays, or legal holidays. And the ticket life in Utah is only good for a specific period of time. And the locate requests, or the tickets as we refer to them, are only good for 14 calendar days. If excavation is going to last longer than 14 calendar days in the state of Utah, the individual that's doing the digging needs to call in an update request to extend the life of that ticket an additional 14 calendar days. You've heard much today about 811, and this new national call before you dig number was introduced back in the year 2007, and today in Utah, over 30% of the incoming telephone calls that we receive at the Blue Stakes Center come in through this 811 number. The other numbers are still being used as our 800 number out there, but we've seen great growth in this 811 number since it was introduced back in 2007. Just to give you a little idea of the ticket volume that takes place here in the state of Utah, you see in this 10-year graph up here the number of tickets or locate requests that were asked for coming into the Blue Stakes Center, and we peaked out in the year 2007 where we processed over 370,000 locate requests in that given year. Since that time, with the economic downturn, we've seen about a 30% decline, but even at that, we're still processing over 250,000 locate requests each year. And to put that in a different perspective for you, for each one of those requests that we process, we notify on average 7 different utility companies for each request that's generated. So it's likely at your dig site, you're going to have up to 7 different utility companies responding to locate and mark their underground utility lines. Let me talk for a few minutes now about marking of the underground utility lines, and that's in section number 5 in the statute that's contained at the back of our excavator's guide. The operators that own, operate, and maintain these underground utility lines, when they receive that 48-hour notice, within that 48 hours, they're required by statute to respond and locate and mark their underground utility lines, or contact the excavator and let them know that they're not in conflict where that excavator's digging. There are also some extenuating circumstances that exist in the statute that allow an operator an additional time to locate and mark their lines. But if it does fall in one of those extenuating circumstances, the operator is still responsible to contact the excavator within that 48 hours and make them aware of what that extenuating circumstance is. Now, how do these operators, how do they mark their underground utility lines? And I've referenced in our excavator's guide, starting on page 24, where we've put into that guide the reproduction of Appendix B from the Common Ground Alliance's best practice of the marking guidelines. Last year in the 2011 legislative session, it was codified in our state law that when these markings are required to be put on the ground, they shall now follow those marking guidelines from the Common Ground Alliance. So we're starting to even see some of these best practices creep into the state law here in Utah. There's another section that's titled in your booklet, Determining the Precise Location of Marked Underground Facilities, and that's in section 5.5. And within this section, it defines a tolerance zone or a safety zone that requires the one doing the digging to dig with hand tools or vacuum excavation or potholing to determine the depth and the extent of all underground utilities within that tolerance zone before any power-driven equipment can be put into that zone. And that tolerance zone in the state of Utah is 24 inches on either side of the markings. So the operators can either put down a center line, and that 24 inches will extend on either side of that center line, or if they mark the outer dimensions of an oversized or large diameter pipe, then that 24 inches goes beyond those outer dimensions of their facility that they've marked. What happens if there's a damage that occurs? What happens if an excavator hits an underground utility line? And two things here that I would just want to stress that's contained in the statute, found in section 7 of the statute, that if an excavator contacts or damages an underground facility, the excavator shall do the following two items. Immediately notify the appropriate operator so that they can get out there and make repairs. But more importantly, if a damage occurs and there's a release of gas or a hazard that's created, they need to also immediately call 911 so that emergency personnel can respond and secure that area. So going on in the statute, in section number 8, there's provisions in there where civil penalties can be awarded in case of a damage. And so according to the civil damages that are in here, it can be up to as much as $5,000 for a single incident on the job site, or if there's multiple incidents at that job site, there can be a maximum of up to $100,000 in civil penalty charged. There's also a civil penalty in there if damage occurs and there's not a one call that was made, then that individual can be fined $500 for that alone. And a civil penalty may be imposed on any person who violates this chapter. And lastly, as far as the law goes, who enforces the statute here in the state of Utah? And in section 12 of the statute, the Attorney General is designated as the one that can bring action. So the bullet points here that I'll just mention, the Attorney General may bring an action in a district court located in the county in which the excavation is located to enforce this chapter. And if the Attorney General does not bring an action, the operator or the excavator may pursue any remedy, including a civil penalty. Now, what kind of impact has happened here in the state of Utah through the outreach of education and different things taking place? You've heard Mr. Kipp talk about the damage information reporting tool, and we've been tracking that tool here in the state of Utah for the last 5 years as it pertains to the root cause where it's attributable to no call being made to the one call center. So you can see up here on the graph, on the table up here in 2006 on a national basis, 38% of the damages occurring to the underground utility lines attributable to no call being made was at 38%. But in Utah that year, we were at 48%. We were higher than the national average. Just unacceptable. So through the different outreach efforts that have happened by the utilities as well as the Blue Stakes Center, you can see that steadily decreasing over the past 5 years. And with the latest report from the DIRT report on a national basis, on a national level it had dropped to 32%, but in Utah we were down to 27%. Now that's a pretty good decline. We think that the word's getting out there and more people are calling before they dig, but even at 27%, that's too high of a figure. I certainly hope there's no one represented in here today that's going to be doing any digging, whether at home or on your job site, without first calling before you dig. And lastly, I just tell you to remember, know what's below, call 811 before you dig, and dig safely. Thank you.